All right, today we're going to dive into something really fascinating, a totally counterintuitive way of looking at the Quran's structure. The source material we're working with lays out this incredible blueprint, but it's not a blueprint of stories. It's a blueprint of a kind of cosmic architecture, a place where all the rules we take for granted get flipped completely upside down. So let's step inside.
So let's just start with the one big provocative question that this whole framework is built on. What if causality, cause and effect, what if it doesn't just run in one direction? What if, on some deeper level, the effect can actually come before the cause? Just let that sink in for a second.
The source material we're exploring has a great name for this place. It calls it an upside-down time sandbox. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a model of reality where everything is inverted. A loud command becomes quiet safety. A destructive fire actually cools down and becomes a source of peace. And life itself? Well, it isn't loud and showy. It's preserved through quiet, powerful restraint. This is the strange new reality we're about to explore.
Okay, so our first stop on this tour is to really understand the basic mechanics of this upside-down universe. We've got to look at the core engine that, according to this reading, is powering the whole system.
As we build this out, you'll see this isn't just a random set of ideas. At its heart is what the source calls a causality dupe. You really have to think of it like the central engine, a repeating cycle that defines how this entire reality works and even how it corrects itself.
Now, the source material gets incredibly specific, pointing to these 4 exact verses. But here's the absolute key, and it says it right there on the screen. This is not a timeline. This is not first this happened and that happened. No. The whole point is that this is causality running in reverse. The event in 1923 is actually the result of what happens in 1911, looping all the way back around.
So, how does this engine actually work? As you can see, it moves through 4 very distinct stages. It all kicks off with a birth, but a birth that happens not in joy, but right at the edge of total collapse. From there, it moves to a moment where fire itself is commanded to become peaceful. Then, entire cities get literally inverted, and finally, a new clock gets set, which seals the whole loop. Let's break each one down.
Okay, let's look at step 1. This comes from the story of Maryam, where the pain of childbirth is so overwhelming she wishes she'd never existed. Now, in this framework, that's not just a sad detail in a story, it's a fundamental principle. New, pure life doesn't pop up out of happy celebrations. It emerges from a point of absolute collapse, where all the noise and ego have been forcibly stripped away into silence.
Step 2 is just a beautiful illustration of this whole inversion idea. You've got the story of Abraham in the fire. The divine command, be cool and safe, doesn't just put up a shield. It fundamentally transforms the nature of the fire. A loud, destructive force literally collapses into a silent, protective space. The sound of the command becomes the quiet of safety.
Now, step 3 takes this idea from the elemental, like fire, to the societal. You have the cities of Lot's people, described as arrogant, loud, chaotic. And what happens? They're literally turned upside down. Their loud structures are buried deep in the earth. Arrogance collapses into silent stone. And get this, death here isn't just destruction, it's a redefinition. What was once loud is now defined by its silence.
And all of this brings us to the final step, the one that seals the loop. Zechariah is told not to speak for 3 nights. All of a sudden, meaning has to be carried not by words, but by signs, by silence. This is what sets the new clock. It establishes a new reality where true knowledge is preserved without speech, and that completes the cycle, right back to the idea of sound collapsing into a truth that lasts.
Okay, so if that's the engine, who are the inhabitants of this reality? Well, the source suggests that we shouldn't think of the prophets here as just historical figures. Instead, we should see them as elemental roles, each one performing a very specific structural job within this grand design.
And this table just maps it out perfectly. You've got Yahyā, John the Baptist, who represents life, but it's a specific kind of life, a restrained mercy. Then Sulaymān or Solomon, who isn't just a king, he represents death, the force that keeps worldly power in check. And look at Ṟīsā, Jesus. He embodies knowledge, but specifically, knowledge concealed. Every figure has a precise function that serves the system's strange law.
Let's just zoom in on Yahyā for a second, because he's such a perfect example. His sign is whiteness, like hair turning gray, a marker of life's quiet passage, not its loud beginning. The source calls him a white flame. Think about that. Fire with no smoke and no noise. It perfectly captures the core idea of this whole system. True, pure life is preserved not by being loud, but by quiet, powerful restraint.
So now let's zoom out a bit. We've looked at the symbolic architecture, now let's talk about the physics of this place. The source material suggests this reality isn't run by just one set of laws. It's actually governed by two different physical systems, two engines running at the exact same time. So on the one hand, you have this conservative or orbital state. You can think of this as the baseline. It's stable, it's predictable, it doesn't change. But then, on the other hand, a second set of physics emerges, a dissipative one. This one is like an engine. It's driven by entropy, by interaction, by the very act of observation. And the universe, in this view, is this constant dance between these two states.
So why does any of this matter? What does this massive cosmic blueprint mean for you, for me, for any individual? Well, here's where it gets really personal. The source argues that this entire system presents each of us with a fundamental choice. When you step into this reality, you are forced onto one of two paths.
And the choice really boils down to this. You can either ascend or you can invert. If you take the path of ascension, your inner world, your heart, becomes a sanctuary. Your actions become these living signs that align with that silent, deep truth we've been talking about. But if you take the other path, the path of inversion, everything gets twisted. Knowledge starts to feel like a threat. Power becomes more important than truth, and the ego just takes over.
And as we start to wrap this up, the core message from all of this really comes down to this one powerful idea. All the noise, all the arrogance, all the shouting to be heard, that all belongs to the ego, and it's temporary. But the silence, that quiet, preserved state we've seen again and again throughout this loop, that belongs to the truth that actually lasts.
So how do you navigate this reality? How do you make sure you're on the path of ascension? Well, the source suggests the key isn't some big external action. It's an internal shift. It's about replacing the ego's constant, frantic urgency with a patient, enduring love. When that happens, time itself flips, and you start to operate with the logic of the inverted loop, not against it.
And this brings us to what might be the most beautiful takeaway from this whole thing. The very act of understanding these patterns, of recognizing this deep, silent architecture in the world around you, that process of discovery, according to the source, is itself a form of worship. It's an alignment with truth that goes beyond any need for formal ritual.
So I'll leave you with a final question to think about. Is this whole framework a kind of hidden code, a secret map deliberately encrypted in the text for us to find? Or is it something else? Is it a powerful lens, a new way of seeing the world that reveals a deeper, more silent order hiding just beneath the noise of our everyday lives? Maybe the answer isn't in finding it, but just in the looking.